Welcome back to Understand and Respond. Taking on a new subject today. We had been talking about what happens when people are hurt by broken trust. People that they believe would love them and take care of them, who were working on their best interest, and then it turns out that they did not live up to that commitment. What do you do? And that is the question for today. What do you do? What do you do? I've taken care of so many married couples. It's been one of my primary ministries. How do you take care of people in a variety of different situations? When you do that, you're going to run into some very painful realities. People don't live up to the oaths and commitments that they've made to each other. Let's use that as a starting point, all right? A story to let you understand what I'm dealing with. I had a lady I dealt with for many years. Called me on the telephone, and she was in tears. My husband has died. Well, I knew him, and that struck me as being a little abrupt. I wondered what she was actually trying to tell me. She said before he died, she found out that he'd been having an affair for 25 years. And the lady who had been the other woman in the situation was a good friend of hers. And her husband had known the entire time, pretty much. The lady claimed, who was the other woman, that if her husband did not finally tell the truth about their relationship, she would take it upon herself to tell the family at his funeral when he passed away. He was fading. And so he was faced with this problem. He was either going to be exposed as an unfaithful marriage partner during his life when he could explain things or cope with it in some way, or he could just ignore the threats that had been made and let everybody deal with it after he had left the scene. Now, if you can understand what that family was going through, there were a lot of tears. And in the interim, as they tried to cope with it, he passed away and died. Now, it didn't quite end there because the lady he'd had the affair with really believed that the relationship that he and she shared was the love of her life. It was also the love of his life, and that he didn't really care for his married partner at all, or his family that they had, but that his love was for the mistress in the relationship. And she made it very clear in the ongoing conversations after his passing that she wanted it clear to everybody that he loved her a lot more than he loved them. And when you stop and you think, okay, here's a broken trust, a broken oath, a broken vow that had been ongoing for 25 years. Life doesn't get much more complicated and painful than that. And yet, he's gone, doesn't have to deal with it. But everybody else has to. Everybody else has to deal with this. It's going to become a permanent part of their family history, part of their common experience. They're going to need to figure out how to put it in the proper context to be able to handle it. It could, without too much exaggeration, rip the family to shreds beyond what it already had done. So what do you do? She was calling me in desperation. What do I do? After some time to try and figure out just what she was asking and making sure I understood what her possibilities were, because some people just want to complain. They just want to dump this load of problems, and they have no intentions of figuring something out or fixing anything or coping with anything. They just want to show you all the dirty laundry. But I had a sense that she was looking for a way to get a handle on this. So I told her what I would tell anybody in that same type of situation. It was time to forgive him. Forgive him. Well, at first, she was not nearly ready to forgive him. She was so angry at him, and she was so bitter at this other lady that had been a former friend, and she went through this whole laundry list of all the things they did together and the vacations they went on together, and it was all a sham. And whoa, wait a minute. Just stop. You must forgive him again and again and again. All those different times, all those different years, all those different events. You have to forgive him. It was almost insulting to her. Forgive him? I'm the injured party here. He never asked for forgiveness. He tried to explain what was happening, but he never asked. He never apologized. He never asked for my forgiveness. Irregardless, you have to forgive him. Why would I say such a terrible thing? Why would I put her through almost like a second indignity? Because it's the only way to be healthy. It's the only pathway. It's the only road that leads to health. It's the only way that gets you through this. Psalm 23 calls it the valley of the shadow of death, where you don't even think you're going to survive it. The only way to get through it is to forgive. What I told her as we continued this conversation over some period of time, reverse the situation just a second and see what he was going through. You say, I don't want to see. I don't want to understand. I don't want to have compassion. I don't want to forgive. I don't want to do it. Yeah, I just want to close it all down. I want to just ignore it. I don't want to deal with it. I want to just say he's an idiot. And he was. And he's a phony. And he was. And he lied. And he did. It hasn't changed a thing. You still got to live tomorrow. You still have to live next week. You still have to get through today. How are you going to get through today? The only way to get through today, and the only way you have hope to get through tomorrow, is to forgive. Think about it for a second. Put yourself in the situation where he has broken his marriage vow and has had an immoral relationship with a lady who was your very close friend 25 years ago. Just put yourself in that situation for a second. Your husband has suddenly lost all of the joy of his life. It has suddenly vanished. He is stuck in the most terrible, complicated, emotionally draining situations anybody could possibly imagine. He has failed you, he has failed your family, and yet he cannot reveal it to anyone. Why? Because this lady is crazy. Okay, not everybody is crazy, but this lady was. She would go after him like a banshee with a pitchfork if he in any way showed that he still loved his wife and family. He wanted to be reconciled to his wife and family. He wanted to be forgiven by his wife and family. He spent 25 years in this no man's land between the wrath of his mistress and the terrible, destructive agony of what he had done to his marriage vows. It's a wonder he survived as long as he did with that kind of stress. He was caught in the grips of sin. It happens all the time. We had a man here recently who had moved from New York to California just shortly after 9/11. And somehow, some way, he decided to start telling people that he had been in one of the Twin Towers that collapsed on 9/11 and barely escaped with his life. He hadn't been. But once he told it, and was asked to tell it again, and then told it again, and then told it again, until it became a part of his life story. And it was only when people started putting some random pieces together that didn't seem to fit very well. The company that he said he was working for didn't have offices in the Twin Tower. Then why was he in the Twin Tower? Why was he in the World Trade Center? And all of a sudden, the whole thing started coming unglued. He was caught in the trap of sin. Oh man, is that a painful place to live. The man who had betrayed his marriage vows couldn't even get sick because he couldn't even die without this sinfulness, even making his last days even more miserable. And it happens again and again. What about the lady that was in the prison and the two guys that eventually did get escaped and were out for 3 weeks? She was trapped in a sinful relationship that had slowly, by one step at a time, gone completely haywire. It had gone completely off the tracks. It had gone completely awash in sin. Don't you have any compassion for someone who gets themselves in such a mess? Don't you have some sense of how foolish it must have made them feel to get caught in that kind of a problem? Man, stop and think about it. What a tragic mess. I don't care. You can go back through the public record. You can see people who tried to claim, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. Hey, come on. They're stuck in the trap of sin. And that is a very painful place to be. Several times, Jesus looked at someone, just could see that there was more going on than just an illness. 4 men brought a friend and they lowered him down through the roof of the house because the crowd was so thick. They tore some of the tiles off and they lowered this man's cot down in front of Jesus. Paralyzed, helpless, tied up in knots, in pain, disabled to the point he couldn't do anything for himself. Tragic, sorrowful. Before Jesus could heal his body, he looked at him, he saw in him someone that had been hooked into that trap of sin. And he looked at him with compassion. He looked at him with grace and said, your sin, your multitude of sin, your life of sin is all forgiven. It has been washed away. Now you can stand up and walk. He could heal his body from the infirmity after he had forgiven the sin. Forgiveness not only heals us, because whatever we have received, whatever has been inflicted upon us, as painful as it is, as humiliating as it is within our power to forgive. And when it is forgiven as Christ told us to forgive, it washes our emotions, our anger, our rage, our fear. It washes it all away. And why is that important? Because we as human beings are driven by several things. We are driven by fear. What happens if somebody finds out? What happens if my wife finds out about this relationship that's gone on 25 years? Fear is a terrifying driving force in anyone's life. Something that you're afraid of, something that you're covering up, something that you don't want somebody to know, something terrifying. It becomes like this huge driving force in your mind and in your heart. It poisons your emotions. It destroys you as a person. It's a wonder he coped as well as he did through those years. Fear. Anger is another driving force. Once anger gets a hold of you, it becomes a habit that is very, very difficult to break. Jealousy. What did Jesus tell the story? The prodigal son, the one younger son went off and took his inheritance and spent it on himself and on his friends. The older one stayed behind. You know what the story is? Jealousy. He had all the fun. I had to stay here and work. The older brother is filled with jealousy. Poisoned his relationship with his father. It ruined everything. He had everything in the world to live for, and he was miserable. In the middle of that wonderful environment where he owned everything, he was miserable because of jealousy. There are emotions that destroy. Malice, anger, lust. There are emotions that destroy. I wish I could tell people, look, Jesus Christ came to save you from this stuff. He came to liberate you from the bondage that happens when you're trapped in sin. Don't walk into the prison cell and close the door behind you and make it even more difficult. If you want to be angry at him, if you want to be mad all the time, if you want to feel hurt all the time, if you want to be filled with vengeance of how could you get even with this other person and all, you've locked yourself in a prison of your own making. I can't forgive. He did too much. It hurt too bad. I can't forgive her. I can't do that. Oh yeah? Who said you can't? In fact, Jesus said you had to. You had to. Forgive our trespasses, Jesus taught us how to pray, as we forgive those who trespassed against us. Forgive us as we have forgiven others. Why does he do it that way? That's not fair. Yes, here it is. That unfaithful spouse was driven by something that led him to a life of misery. A life that had no joy. Every smile he ever smiled was phony. There was no joy in his heart. Every chuckle he ever made was a chuckle to try and cover something up that was too big to be revealed. Jesus wants us to live free of guilt, free of fear, free of anger, free of rage, free of bitterness. The only way you can do it is forgive as he has forgiven us. You see, we're driven just like they were driven. Does it mean it takes us into illicit marital relationship? extramarital relationship? No. It doesn't mean that it takes us into the exact same activity. It takes us into the same trap of sinfulness. It takes us into the same prison cell right next door to the person who's trapped in their own prison cell. It's too late for him. He's gone. His life is over. He's under a death sentence. Don't put yourself in the same death sentence. Don't go living the rest of your days on death row. Listen, forgiveness unlocks the prison door. Forgiveness accepts our failures, our willingness to live with anger every day of our life, our willingness to live with bitterness and rage, our willingness to live with jealousy and envy, our willingness to accept our own emotional prison, so that we can forgive somebody else and they can be set free. Forgiveness is not only important to your health, it's absolutely essential to your salvation. If you have asked Jesus Christ to forgive your sin, you are required to forgive those who have trespassed against you. I have had some people do some terrible things to me, say terrible things about me. They have beaten me up without an ounce of compassion. And I have, whenever I knew how to, sat across from the table from them and said, I forgive you. I am praying for God's blessings upon you and upon your life and upon your ministry. I want you to do well. I want you to feel God's power and authority. I want you to be free to minister without any encumbrances. I forgive you. That make me such a great guy? No. No. It means I'm trying to be healthy. I'm trying to be faithful. I was given a command to love as Jesus Christ loved. You think he didn't have to forgive his disciples? Oh, man. Those guys were always fouling up. Peter, you have such little faith. On the last night of his life, Peter said, I'll go to the death with you. You don't have to worry about me, Jesus. I'm going to stand right up there with you and I'll defend you. I'll be right there. And Jesus said, my friend, my brother, before the morning dawns the next day, you will have denied you even knew who I was 3 times. He had to forgive them all, just like he had to forgive us. And the only price he asks us to pay is love your brothers and sisters, your husbands, your wives, your children, your friends, enough to forgive them when they sin against you. It's a part of the loving relationship. No matter what somebody has done that showed they didn't love, or that at a time of weakness they gave up the challenge to love every day, your job is to love today as Jesus loved. And that means to forgive. you don't really have any options if you want to live for Him and be free in your life of faith. Thank you.